Hi, I'm Joshua Pilot from the Computer Engineering Technology program at Vanier, Egypt, and today me and my teammate Mohammad Almasri are going to present our Halloween project for our Profession of Computer Engineering class. When we started this project, the first thing that we really decided on was that we wanted to be able to use a real pumpkin because we thought that, well, firstly, it would look much better than a plastic pumpkin, and secondly, because we thought it would pose a bunch of interesting challenges to us. And really the only other goal that we had was to be able to have the pumpkin stand on its own, in that you would be able to remove the electronics and still have a good looking jack-o'-lantern. So for the materials that we used, aside from decorations and ornaments, we used a pumpkin, a knife, or anything to carve with really, some gardening foam, brackets machined out of sheet metal, an Arduino, a breadboard, a lot of wires, some LEDs, 3 electric motors, a sensor, some zip ties, masking tape, electrical tape, and finally adhesive putty that we used to connect the wires.
So we started out by planning the circuit, and so we draw on a paper the mechanism and all, like the draft of the circuit, and just for us to have an idea how everything is going to perform. And then we started building the prototype circuit. We wanted to make sure that the Arduino, the programming microcontroller, we wanted to make sure it was performing the task we wanted, and everything worked out perfectly. So we moved on by using the pumpkin, and so we started by carving the pumpkin, and we wanted to make sure that the pumpkin is clean before we do anything else, because if we accidentally short the circuit with the pumpkin, the circuit is just not gonna work the way we want, and it's gonna completely go insane. So we want to make sure that the pumpkin is clean, where all the electronics we're placing inside is doing everything on its own. And so once the cleaning process was done, we started by making a platform for the circuit, because we wanted to make sure that the circuit is placed in a platform and making sure it's not touching any other places in the pumpkin. So we designed a platform, and that platform had brackets. It was used foam. We used the foam from plants and put the Arduino on it, the breadboard on it as well. We tied it to make sure that everything is well placed, and then when the platform was well done, everything was set. It was now time to put the electronics in there. So we put the Arduino, we put the breadboard all in its place. Then we wired all the motors to their locations, all the LEDs to their location, and we made holes just to like have the motors from the hand be able to like maneuver. And we made another hole where the wire from the power supply comes from, so like this we can obviously operate the circuit. And then when all this was done, we made sure everything was testing properly. So everything was testing was perfect. We were really proud of it. And then once we know that everything mechanics, everything was done, we added aesthetics. Basically, we added the gentleman hat and the skeleton arms.
So the first real difficulties we had was having to work with a real pumpkin, that is to say, something perishable. This caused quite a few problems, such as obvious ones like having to preserve the pumpkin without having it rot, but also having to create a solid base that could have properly fit inside the pumpkin, because we couldn't use the bottom of the pumpkin itself to put the components in because for stability reasons. And the second really big problem was spatial limitations and having to fit multiple moving components inside of the pumpkin, all the while we needed to balance all the wiring that happened inside. And if even a single wire became disconnected, it became an entire ordeal to try and fix it. But other than those two things, most of the work was pretty straightforward. It was just tedious.
What is this supposed to do?
As a result, our project went very successfully, and our electronics was operational. Everything was running very well, especially the motors. Like, we had to make sure that they were maneuvering the right movement, and everything was done in the right time. The time wasn't really our problem in this project. Everything was scheduled, and thank God. And then we had this huge lesson we learned, and it's crucial that you guys take note of this lesson, because this was a big issue for us. And that issue was, guys, don't underestimate your project. Because we underestimated your project, we used to think that we could attach motors on the pumpkin, which is absolutely impossible, because the pumpkin doesn't stick with Scotch tape, doesn't stick with hot glue. Nothing worked out. So basically, it was a failure. We had a pumpkin, which was our prototype. It was a failure. It was pure trash. It wasn't working. It was a complete horrible situation. And so we had to restart it, and that's when we designed the platform for the electronics. And so, yeah, guys, don't underestimate your project. It's such a terrible idea. Just make sure that everything is planned out perfectly, because our mechanism wasn't very well done. And so we had to fix that problem. But at the end, it worked very well. So thanks for listening, guys.